That man be delivered from revenge is for me the bridge to the highest hope, and a rainbow after long storms. Adam and Eve bore 2 sons, the elder Cain and the younger Abel. Abel was a shepherd. Like a lion, he strode boldly beside his flock. Soon the wolves learned to fear his roar and his club. He followed his herd wherever they wandered, sleeping under the stars and killing his food with spear or stone. Abel's belly was ever full, and he grew strong and hearty from his diet of game, dairy, and foraged berries. Cain was a farmer. He worked the fields in the hot sun and labored even harder than his brother Abel. But sometimes the crops failed. Sometimes disease took them, or wild animals ravaged them. And Cain, who had lived his life protected by the fences of the farm, had not developed the courage or strength to fend off the wild animals. He often went hungry, and his diet of grains and vegetables left him weak and vulnerable to disease. Abel always provided Adam and Eve with plentiful food and clothed them with wool and hides. But Cain often had nothing to offer his parents. Abel always burned fatty cuts of meat on his altars to God, and poured out libations of rich milk, berries, and honey. But Cain's altars smoldered with empty husks and rotten vegetables. In all ways God favored Abel, and so did Adam and Eve. Therefore, resentment coiled in Cain's stomach like a serpent, and one day he lay on his belly in the grass, waiting for his brother to come back to the fields to sacrifice. And when his brother knelt down in prayer, Cain rose from the grass and struck him down with a stone. Abel's body fell dead, and Cain's crops were watered with the blood of his brother. And Cain knew that he had destroyed something beautiful and good, but his heart had become proud and bitter, and he would not repent. So Cain became a fugitive on the earth, hiding in the shadows and dwelling in caves, fearful of his fellow man and of God. The descendants of Cain are of the serpent's breed and go cunningly in the shadows, but the descendants of Abel are of the lion's breed and walk boldly in the light. And so are the generations of Cain and the generations of Abel forever at war. And Adam and Eve had a 3rd son, Seth. Seth was a pious man. He had not been gifted with the courage of Abel or the cunning of Cain, but his spirit was heavy with wisdom, and his vision was clear and far-shooting. And God said to Seth,
"Hold back your generations from the generations of Cain, and keep them aloof on your holy mountain. For if your generations mix with the generations of Cain, there will be a curse upon you and your generations, and the serpent will forever walk among you and bite at your heels."
But Seth could not keep his generations back, and they descended into the valleys and mixed with the blood of Cain. No longer did the generations of Cain have to dwell in caves in fear of the generations of Abel, for now they could conceal themselves among the generations of Seth and pass their cunning as spiritual wisdom. And from out of the generations of Seth, the descendants of Cain have waged a secret war upon the descendants of Abel, not a war of spears and swords, but of deception and subversion, of truth and lies. Resentment. It creeps upon you like a plague. Slowly, bit by bit, it eats away at you like rot, poisoning your soul and turning your heart against life itself. The story of Cain and Abel, on one level, is an explanation of the psychological phenomena of resentment and revenge. It further expands upon the consequences of the fall, namely, that some are able to maintain a free, prelapsarian state of living, in harmony with nature and in alignment with their own nature, while others are not. Abel lives a natural, free, untroubled life, wandering the pastures with his flock. Cain, however, must devote his days to intense labor and live in servitude to the earth. Abel grows strong from his diet and the elements. The wild beasts test his courage and strengthen his virtue. Cain grows weak from his diet. His courage and his instincts atrophy from lack of use. While Abel lives in the moment, guided by his instincts, Cain must learn to think only for the future. For Abel, life is free and good. For Cain, life is suffering and labor. Therefore, Cain becomes resentful against life, and moreover against Abel, who does not suffer from life, and who finds freedom and joy where Cain finds suffering and servitude. Cain begins to hate Abel, who embodies health, beauty, and strength, all the virtues which nature favors and rewards. Cain hates life, and plots his vengeance against life. He seeks to exact revenge on God and nature, since they cruelly favor Abel and unfairly punish him. Nietzsche believed that resentment is the symptom of a sick animal. All living creatures seek to expend their energy and exert their will upon the world. This is the will to power. This is the most fundamental law of life. If one's instincts have no outlet, as is the case with the repressed and over-socialized, they fester into resentment. This is why the hatred and resentment which drive serial killers to murder often stems from profound feelings of impotence. If one is unable to express their will to life, like a caged animal, they turn feral and are seized by the bloodlust of vengeance.
Why did you actually kill the girls?
My frustration, my inability to communicate socially, sexually. I wasn't impotent, but emotionally I was impotent. I was scared to death of failing in male-female relationships.
The instincts, when they are not expressed, become a source of tremendous, violent energy. Throughout history, warriors and shamans have used various ascetic practices to cultivate and repurpose the energy of the instincts. However, when the restriction of the instincts stems not from a strength of will and discipline, but from impotence and weakness, the instincts turn against life itself and become destructive.
I was raging inside. There was just incredible energies, positive and negative.
Nietzsche believed that there are two essential attitudes towards life which one can take: affirmation and denial, and that these attitudes stem from the health or sickness, the weakness or strength of an individual. One's relationship with one's instincts, one's health, is what creates the divide between the noble and the ignoble, the life affirmers and deniers, the Abels and the Cains. Nietzsche writes, "While the noble man lives in trust and openness with himself, the man of resentment is neither upright nor naive, nor honest and straightforward with himself. His soul squints, his spirit loves hiding places, secret paths, and back doors. Everything covert entices him as his world, his security, his refreshment. He understands how to keep silent and how not to forget, how to wait, how to be provisionally self-deprecating and humble. A race of such men of resentment is bound to become eventually cleverer than any noble race. It will also honor cleverness to a far greater degree, namely as a condition of existence of the first importance. Resentment itself, if it should appear in the noble man, consummates and exhausts itself in an immediate reaction, and therefore does not poison. On the other hand, it fails to appear at all on countless occasions on which it inevitably appears in the weak and impotent. The repression of the instincts makes us self-conscious, clever, and wicked, as we discussed in the previous video on Genesis. Civilization, up until this point, has been a process of the increasing internalization of man, the increasing repression of our instincts, and therefore the heightening of our cleverness and internalized consciousness. In modern industrial society, we have become over-socialized and repressed. Like animals in a zoo, we suffer terribly from our own nature. And this brings us to the initially opaque, evolutionary, or historical meaning of the story of Cain and Abel. Nietzsche believed that all great civilizations are founded by an aggressive, untamed people which is still in touch with its instincts and with nature. A healthy people which has the unspent energy and strength of will to fully affirm life. It is no coincidence that Cain is a farmer and Abel is a shepherd. The greatest conquests in history were carried out by pastoralists upon agriculturalist populations, such as the Indo-European conquest of the native European population. The Indo-Europeans were horse-riding, warlike pastoralists originating in the Russian steppes. We know from their skeletons that they were bigger and stronger than the native European farmers, who suffered the ails of agricultural living, namely poor nutrition and disease. The Indo-Europeans lived a free, nomadic lifestyle and had a diet rich in dairy and meat. The Russian steppes are a harsh environment, and it likely shaped them into a rugged and courageous people. They tore through Europe, slaughtering and conquering, making it all the way to the farthest reaches of the north and as far east as India. Again and again, history has shown that the nomadic pastoralist lifestyle and diet create fierce and hearty peoples, while early agricultural populations were left open to the perils of plague, poor diet, and enslavement. In this context, the story of Cain and Abel might also be understood as an allegory for the victory of the agricultural way of life over the nomadic one. This is all to say that lifestyle, diet, and health shape the morality of individuals and peoples. This is why Nietzsche believed that thriving cultures begin with a healthy body and properly ordered instincts. He writes, "In Athens, Cicero expresses his surprise that the men and youths were by far superior to the women in beauty. But what work and effort the male sex had demanded of itself for centuries there in the service of beauty. For one must not be mistaken about the method here. Merely training one's feelings and thoughts is worth practically nil. First, one must convince the body. It is decisive for the lot of a people and of humanity that one begin culture in the right place, not in the soul, as was the fatal superstition of the priests and semi-priests. The right place is the body, demeanor, diet, physiology, and the rest is a consequence. For this reason, the Greeks are still the first cultural event of history. They knew, they did what was needed. The body is the soil from which virtue, morality, and culture grow. Great cultures do not spontaneously blossom out of thin air. They are the result of a virtue, discipline, lifestyle, and physicality which has been cultivated and sculpted over a long period of time. And yet, as a civilization becomes wealthy and its people become comfortable, they lose touch with their instincts and their civilization degenerates into decadence. Its people become sickly, over-socialized, and nihilistic until it is eventually conquered by a culture which still has energy, will, and health. This is exactly what the Romans did to the Greeks, and the Germanic tribes, in turn, did to the Romans. Our civilization is now in a decadent cycle. At the head of our institutions and political bodies, leading our culture, are the transhumanists. They reject the body and lead a war against it. They reject biology and nature and seek to transcend them. The body is life. A culture or ideology which despises the body despises life. The transhumanists are life haters and deniers. They use glittering words, justice, equality, progress, to hide their secret resentment against life and against all that is beautiful and good. Their words may be enticing and noble, but their bodies betray them. Their sickly, pale visages and shrunken forms reveal the rot of their souls. In their hearts, it is their secret desire to be tyrants, judges, and executioners, and to thus exact their vengeance upon the world. In Thus Spake Zarathustra, Nietzsche writes, "Thus I speak to you in parable, you who make souls whirl, you preachers of equality. To me you are tarantulas, and secretly vengeful. Therefore I tear at your webs, that your rage may lure you out of your lie holes, and your revenge may leap out from behind your word, justice. For that man be delivered from revenge is for me the bridge to the highest hope, and a rainbow after long storms." The tarantulas, the life-haters, are the descendants of Cain, passing themselves off as wise leaders. They are the serpents who eventually corrupt all institutions because they have a mind for waiting and scheming. Since they cannot interact with the world honestly, they take the thinker's path and use tools of manipulation and subversion to assert their will upon the world. If there is anything akin to original sin in our new value system, it is resentment, which is, most fundamentally, denial of life and subversion of the instincts and the will to life. Resentment lurks in all of us, the impulse to deny life when we are confronted with suffering, the impulse to hate those who are favored by nature or fortune. The great danger of the descendants of Seth, those gifted with intellectual and spiritual insight, is that they become entrapped in the thinker's web and become creatures of resentment, like Dostoevsky's Underground Man. The great danger of the descendants of Abel, those gifted with physical grace and strength, is that they let others think for them and are led to their own destruction by the life-haters. In an unnatural environment such as ours, one cannot rely on instinct and physicality alone. One must also have the correct first principles and values. Yet if one seeks to navigate life on principle and intellect alone, as is so common in our age, and does not develop their physicality or hone their instincts, their principles will fail and mislead them. To embrace life fully and embrace the body fully is to cure yourself of resentment. We must recognize that some are favored by nature and by fortune, but that we all have the divine will of life within us. We must not resent those who are more beautiful, stronger, or more fortunate than us, but rather view them as ideals to strive for. Resentment is a symptom of illness. Virtue and culture begin in the body, in the instincts, in health. To have a healthy body and a healthy relationship with the instincts, and thus with nature and life itself, is to create the soil for beautiful things to grow. From a sick tree grows poisonous fruit. From a healthy tree grows the fruit of life. We should aspire to live like lions, courageous, untroubled, going boldly across the plains, fearful of none, like far-sighted eagles, soaring high above the mountains, aloof and discerning. We should aspire to embody the nobility and grace exemplified in nature's creations. Yourself wants to go under, and that is why you have become despisers of the body. You are no longer able to create beyond yourselves. That is why you are angry with life and the earth. An unconscious envy speaks out of the squinting glance of your contempt. I shall not go your way, O despisers of the body. You are no bridges to the overman. Thus spake Zarathustra.